Welcome back to another episode of the Facade Files with Ace Hawkinson. I'm your host, Ace Hawkinson. Today we discuss an obscure case involving what is believed to be a powerful demonic ritual, Daemonium Aranea. Stay tuned, right here on Channel 93. It happened here, in this building. It was known as West Street Apartments at the time. In early fall of that year, 2013, one of the residents began to notice something strange. 29-year-old Sarah McNeil lived by herself at West Street. Sarah began to notice a major increase in the amount of spiders throughout the building. At some point, she contacted Ed Lazarin, the owner of the apartment complex. Ed managed West Street in Waynebrook City, along with various other properties, through his company, the Lazarin Property Group. Ed was considered by some individuals as peculiar. He also has a reputation as being somewhat creepy. When Sarah contacted Ed about the spiders in the building, he dismissively stated that he would look into it. Nothing was done about the spiders. So Sarah took it upon herself to call a local insect control company. 2 men were sent over by the company a few days later. They asked Sarah if there were any unused areas in the building where the spiders could be nesting. Sarah told them that the basement level is empty and dark. It was once used as office space, but is essentially abandoned now. The 2 men, Thomas Everton and Gerald Anthony, told Sarah that they would take a look through the building, starting with the basement.
My name is Carmela Ortega. I was in my 4th year as a homicide detective with the Waynebrook City Police at the time of the West Street incident. We received reports that 2 employees with a local insect control company went to West Street for a standard consultation. Neither of them returned home that night. I went to West Street to speak with Sarah and anyone else who might have seen them. Sarah told me that she spoke with the men about the spiders and the basement. She said that she was waiting to hear back from them but never did. She then suggested that I might want to check out the basement myself. She also suggested that I call Ed Lazarin, but warned me that he was a bit odd. Then Sarah told me that there was something else bothering her. In her words, the other residents on her floor seemed to have been vanishing. She hadn't seen anyone move out in months, and yet the floor was nearly empty. The last person she saw on her floor was her neighbor at the end of the hall. She described the man as handsome but quiet. He had long, dark hair and kept to himself. But she hadn't seen him or anyone else on her floor in weeks. She said she called Ed and asked if people on her floor had been moving out. But he told her that it was none of her business and hung up. I then received an important phone call and had to leave.
Later that evening, Sarah went down to the basement by herself. She was fed up with the spiders in the building, so she took a can of bug spray with her. The basement was full of webs. She went down there looking for spider nests. But what she found was much more horrifying. She turned a corner and suddenly found herself frozen with fear at what she saw. She then sprinted back to the elevator in an adrenaline-fueled panic. Sarah locked herself in her apartment and immediately called Detective Ortega. Ortega didn't answer, so Sarah left a voicemail. Sarah described what she saw in the basement as a monster. Detective Ortega spoke with Sarah on the phone the following morning. Sarah was packing her things and leaving as soon as she could. She again told Ortega about what was living in the basement.
Sarah spoke to me about what she described as a monstrous spider in the basement. I didn't know what she meant at the time. I suppose I just imagined something tarantula-sized. I needed to search the building for possible leads in the investigation anyway. So I went back to West Street that evening. Sarah was long gone by the time I got there. At some point, I made my way down to the basement. I got a creepy feeling, like I wasn't alone. I began to search through the various hallways. I entered through a doorway and the light turned on automatically. When I saw it, I couldn't believe my eyes. I thought it was fake at first, but then it screamed and moved towards me. It was a giant spider-like monster. It followed me into the hallway. It lunged at me, but I fired 2 shots into it. Then it knocked me into the wall and ran off into the darkness. I was stunned for quite some time. I got up slowly and waited to see if it would come back. I probably should have left, but I decided to clear the rest of the basement instead. Luckily, I didn't see the monster again. But when I searched the rest of the basement, I discovered various sets of skeletal remains. They were wrapped in webs. The bones were picked dry. There looked to be at least 24 skulls in total. When backup arrived, we called Ed Lazarin to inform him of what we found in his building. When we brought him in for questioning, he had a legitimate alibi. Ed was fully cooperative and provided us with the building's security camera footage. The footage showed only one person who had been in the basement for the past year. A man with long dark hair. It was the same man Sarah said she hadn't seen in weeks. We asked Ed if he knew where the man lived now. Ed said that he still lives at West Street. His name was Victor Damian Romero.
Detective Ortega and her team paid a visit to Victor's unit. They knocked on the door, and a man with long dark hair answered. It was Victor. He was quiet and seemed caught off guard. Ortega asked him if they could come inside and ask him some questions. Initially he refused, but Ortega insisted that he speaks with them. Victor then reluctantly opened his door. Not much was gained from the questioning. Victor denied knowing about the basement. But Ortega noticed a strange-looking book on the bookshelf. She asked Victor about the book, and he simply stated that it was a primary resource for his work. Ortega asked if she could take the book with her. Victor just stared at her for a moment. He agreed to let her take it, but demanded that he get it back when they were finished. It was a very old volume with detailed instructions for various demonic rituals. One of these rituals involved a human subject transforming into what appeared to be a giant spider-like entity through a complex blood sacrifice process. It was called Daemonium Aranea. The following photograph fell out of the book. Victor's prints and DNA were taken from the book and the photo. They matched the forensics found on the bones and throughout the basement. Ortega arrested Victor 2 days later. Thanks for watching the Facade Files with Ace Hawkinson. Until next time, stay tuned right here on Channel 93.